Welcome. Good morning. Thank you for joining us for our session. This is to make sure that you're in the right place. It's kind of a mouthful, but this is delivering next-generation POS clients and immersive mobile experiences. My name is Jeff Blucher. I'm a program manager on the Dynamics retail team, and I'll be joined on stage later by Yabin Liu, who will do a portion of the presentation towards the end. First, we'll start off with the disclaimer. So it's kind of your standard legal disclaimer that you've probably seen in a lot of the sessions. I'll add another additional disclaimer onto this, in that the demo that you're about to see are pre-release bits, so there'll be some things that aren't quite fully polished. There might be some unexpected happenings that you might see. In addition to that, my demo machine that I planned to use just failed, so now I'm remoting back into a machine that's in Redmond. so maybe there'll be some unexpected surprises there, but we'll cross our fingers and hope everything works out okay. So we're going to start off talking about the overall goals and investments that we have and that we laid out for this release, this R3 release, specifically around the modern clients. So when we did this, we wanted to make sure that we took the new clients to the next level, and that these are our new modern clients that we're investing in for the future. And in that, we know that the experiences are becoming more and more important to retailers. So retail has changed drastically over the last few years based on technology. Certain retailers have been extremely successful in kind of creating this buzz and this movement towards new technology in retail stores by using mobile devices, whether it's handheld phones or tablets. It's basically bringing the cashiers out from behind the cash wrap in the checkout lines and putting them out onto the sales floor, where you have these more intimate clienteling experiences. And now the cashier becomes more of a sales rep or a sales associate that can actually help the customer find the products that they're looking for and provide better customer service. So in doing that, you want that experience to be good for not only the user, but for the consumer as well. And so we've invested a lot in these rich and immersive experiences. And we say, anytime, anywhere, on any device. And we're really delivering on that. And we'll talk about that more throughout this session, as well as the session that we have tomorrow morning. So hopefully you can make both of the sessions. The anywhere, anytime, any device is a very important point. And so therefore we need to make sure that we built this on a very flexible architecture. The session tomorrow is going to go much deeper into that, but you'll get a little bit of that in the session today. We'll mention first and best on first and best on Windows, and we'll probably say that a few times. But basically, anywhere, anytime, any device means going beyond just Windows. It means going beyond Windows Phone when we talk about Android and iOS platforms as well. So those were our goals. Now these are our investments. So we invested, again, on the user experiences. This is through usability studies. This is through multiple design iterations. This is learning from other Microsoft products and the kind of the modern client or the Windows 8 apps and that have been available and that we can draw on and improve on. Omni-channel support. Everything that we do from a Dynamics retail perspective is omni-channel. So we talk about brick and mortar stores where we have our enterprise POS client, which is the WinForms or the Win32 rich client, the new modern clients that you'll be seeing today. We have our SharePoint online storefront for e-commerce sales. And we even, in this R3 release, have added call center support for being able to do phone orders, mail orders, catalog orders, customer service on your orders that might have come in through other channels. So an order that's placed online can be picked up in the store, or an order that is placed online can be modified or can be reviewed by a customer service rep in the call center. An order is an order, and that is a very strong point in our omni-channel experience. For the modern POS clients, especially in this release, we're really focusing on store operations. So that means it's a client that's meant to be used in the store. It goes beyond just point of sale, but we focus mainly on that as the primary scenario. But we focus across store operations in general in this release. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. Yabin will actually go into it in much more detail, especially in the session tomorrow morning when we go kind of more behind the scenes and into more of the technical details. The point that I want to make with this slide is the architecture that we've chosen is really visual, and that which portions of it are platform dependent versus which portions are platform independent. So you can see there's a lot more green boxes than there are blue boxes. And that's kind of my main point with this slide here, rather than going into all of the technical details that Yabin would be happy to do later. So in using things like HTML5, JavaScript for the presentation portion, the view models is a very important piece that allows us to be able to have one set of code that works across all of the different devices that we're talking about. We talk about cross-platform and multi-form factor. So it's tablets and phones, and it's Windows, it's Android, and it's iOS. So these aren't mock-ups. These are actual screenshots from kind of in-house apps that we've developed as kind of proof of concepts. So whether they'll be released at any point as a Microsoft product or whether they'll be sample code or part of the SDK is probably still a bit all TBD, but these are all kind of proof of concept apps that are actually working that we use in-house to be able to test this concept of anywhere on any device, any platform. So you can see we've got Android tablet, we've got an iPad, and an iPhone. But again, first and best on Windows. So we spent the bulk of our time, but the vast majority of our time, on the Windows 8 client. So you think of that as the tablet client, but I also don't want to kind of pigeonhole into the word mobile or into the concept of it being on a tablet. This will work just fine on any PC, on any Windows 8 PC. So if it is this more of a traditional checkout experience, it could certainly still be running on a PC in a checkout lane. It doesn't need to be a mobile device. A lot of people will call these our mobile solutions, which they are, and that's a good strong point of them. But really, these are the modern clients, which can be used either as a traditional point of sale or as a mobile device. And these are just quick screenshots of the tablet and the phone, which you'll see later today and again tomorrow. The scenarios that we've identified for this release, and we'll continue to build on these as future releases come, are the ones that you'd expect to be in the store. If you're familiar with our enterprise pause, one of the things that we did was we wanted to shoot for feature parity. So it's actually it's a very rich client. It's a mature client. It has a lot of capabilities across a lot of different scenarios. So our goal was feature parity. We should be able to do the same things as we can in the new client that we could in the old client. For the most part, we got there. There's a few things that aren't quite there yet. We're still working on them, and we'll get there. And there's certainly a lot of things that are different. So we don't want to just simply re-implement something the exact same way that it was before when we have an opportunity to make it better. But the main scenarios would be POS and clienteling, customer orders, your daily operations, which is kind of a bucket for everything that's not selling, a lot of the drawer operations, like your opening amounts, your closing amounts, handling your shifts. Store inventory capabilities, which would be picking, receiving, and counting. And then the ability to do role-based layouts. So again, if you're familiar with our Enterprise POS client, the fact that you can define the layouts in the back office and push those out to the store is key capability that we didn't want to lose when we were moving to the new platform. So with this, we're just going to go quickly across what some of the capabilities are of each scenario, and then we'll go more into demonstration to be able to show what that is. So when we talk about POS and clienteling, we kind of mean both aspects of cash and carry transactions at a higher sales volume, basically just selling. Can't say it any more simply than that. As well as the clienteling experiences, which are the more kind of intimate experiences with the sales rep out on the sales floor working with the consumer. Kind of a laundry list of capabilities that go under this scenario. I'm not going to read them all. If you're familiar with the Enterprise POS, then almost all of these are going to ring a bell. But it's not just your basic selling. It's also things like returns and voids and price overrides and applying discounts. We can do split tender and multi-tender, multi-currency within the modern POS client as well as we could with the Enterprise POS client. So with that, I'll be jumping into a demonstration, and we'll keep our fingers crossed a bit. I can see it up here. Sorry about this. We did switch machines last minute, but it's the same connector. It's still...
Yeah. Oh, you were on 3.
There we go. Thank you. Okay. Sorry about that. So you'll notice that I'm running it in an emulator. This is important for a few different reasons. For one, working with it in a development environment and testing it, it's a lot easier at times to be able to sit at your desk and use your full keyboard and mouse. Also, running it in the emulator will allow it to not be full screen. So if you're trying to do 2 things at once, emulator is also important. And then thirdly, at least at this point in the release and in this version, the app doesn't actually handle scaling everywhere it needs to at this point. So if you're demoing this, I highly recommend using the emulator unless you're using it on an actual device, or you can set your screen resolution to the appropriate screen resolution. So by using the emulator here, I'm forcing it to 1366 by 768, and it'll ensure that everything looks okay. You certainly can run it directly on the desktop, but you'll get some issues where images don't scale properly, or maybe some of the UI gets laid out a little bit wonky. So I'm going to log in. I'm going to show some of the basic POS and clienteling scenarios. You'll notice that it's colorful, it's vibrant. This is part of those kind of rich immersive experiences that we're talking about. So the application is very themable, skinnable, very configurable from a back office perspective, and it gets pushed down to the stores. So you can do a lot of this without having to write code. So this is part of its visual profile that we'll talk about later. I'm going to log in as the cashier first. And you'll notice that we have this new concept of something called a welcome screen. So this is taking kind of role-based user interface that we've always done in the past and bringing that again to the next level. So basically, rather than going directly into the transaction screen, I can come into my welcome screen now, where I can surface tasks and information that's relevant to this particular user and this particular role. So I've logged in as a cashier. You can see Josh has kind of a funny picture up there. It's a picture of a lady, but we'll ignore that. And you can see that they've got some basic tasks that maybe this cashier would have. Going into the sales screen, you're going to get the till layout or the screen layout that's for your more traditional point of sale, selling processes that you're going to have. And this is just one user interface. So our UI is all data driven. So this is sample data. A user can define any kind of a layout that they want to. If I go ahead and log off as Josh and log back in as another user, this user will be a manager user. The changes are a bit subtle, but you'll notice that the manager has an extra button grid that's available. Those are manager operations. Now, this was a subtle change. This could be a completely different UI with different theming, different skinning if you wanted it to be. But in this case, our brand and our theming is important to us, so we're just using it for more of a functional purpose of being able to add in manager operations. And if I go into my sale, you'll see it's a different layout again. So now the buttons are over on the right side instead of the left side. Depending on how keen your eye is, you'll notice that there's some different UI elements that are available. And we'll talk a bit about how we can do that later as well. But the important point is that the user interface itself is all data-driven, and this is just sample data. If you don't like this layout, you could create a different layout. So we're going to go ahead and do a basic sales transaction. And if I had a scanner, I could scan a barcode. Since I don't, I can enter in an item number, which I got wrong. I can search. If I'm looking for a laptop, I can do a product search. The search results will come back as a list, or you can actually change the view. So this is our list view. You can do a card view. And then depending on the products and the type of retailer, if it's where you can have rich images and you can kind of enrich the products to have additional information, then kind of these large cards work better, especially if it's really interesting products that you're looking at. But to fit more on the screen for data density, the list view works. I can go ahead and add the product to the transaction from search. Here it's asking me which color I want, as it's a product master with variants. and I can add in the product that way. I can simply swipe my credit card to pay, or I can set up these payment buttons. So these are my quick payment buttons of maybe my most commonly used payment methods. Or if you touch just the amount due, then that's going to bring you in a list of all of the payment methods that are configured for this store. So this is all, again, configured from the back office. It's all channel specific, and these are all the different payment methods that would be available. But I just want to use my pay by card. Again, swiping the credit card would be easiest. I'm going to quickly enter in some test data. And I can go ahead and get my sample card authorization. Actually, this isn't configured for signature capture, but we can do signature capture right on the device. So if it was a tablet, you can hand the tablet to the consumer. They can sign with their finger if they want. Or we can do hardware integration as well. We're working on something that Yabin's going to talk more about called a hardware station or a pay station, where you can actually, especially if you're using mobile devices throughout the store, you can have certain places throughout the store that maybe have a cash drawer and a printer and maybe a pin pad for debit or something like that. And then multiple devices can share those. So you can have 5 or 6 sales associates out with tablets and maybe only 2 or 3 pay stations. Maybe if they're paying by card and they want an email receipt, then you can just swipe it right on the device and then email them the receipt and then use the pay station only for cash transactions or if they want a printed receipt. So here's showing, again, it's configured to prompt for email receipt. If there was a customer on the transaction, we already knew their email address, then that would be filled in. We also have customer preferences, whether they want the email address or whether they want the receipt always emailed or on demand. I'll go ahead and add a customer now. So I can add them by their number. I could actually swipe or scan their loyalty card and add the customer in that way. You can view customer details. So I think my demo data is going to be a bit limited on this one. But you see we have pretty rich customer information as well. So as this is loading up, we'll have what store they last visited in, how long they've been a customer for, if they have a credit limit or what their balance is can be configured to be able to show that as well. We can show you their recent purchases, which if there are any, so this doesn't have any demo data in it. This would be which products that they purchased most recently, and that way the sales rep can kind of get a feel for what they've purchased recently. They can use that to do some suggestive cross-selling or upselling. Or they can even just ask them, how is this working out for you? I see that you bought this last time or something like that. This would be much better with data in it. But wish list is actually with our online storefront, we have the ability to create wish lists. And wish list is kind of more of a generic term for it. It could be a shopping list or a wish list, or you can have multiple lists that you can have. And you can choose to share or not share those wish lists so that the sales rep in the store can have that information or not. Suggested products are actually, it goes beyond just relating products together. We can do that as well. So if you want a very specific upsell or cross-sell that's done by the category owner or maybe by the merchandising manager, or we can do it where we actually can look at which products have been purchased together. So based on what their recent purchases are and what's in their wish list, we can actually generate what suggested products could be that would go well with those. I'm going to go ahead and add this customer into the transaction here. And I can add up another product real quick. I do know that number, so that one will go in pretty quickly. And in this case, I'll just go ahead and pay cash to complete this sale. Finally, we have the ability to browse for products. So we can scan, we can type in the numbers, we can search for them. We can also browse for products. And when we're browsing for products, we can browse for products in our current store, which is probably the most common scenario. But you can also browse for products in other stores as well. So this is new functionality that's in R3. So not only do I have access to my assortment, but maybe if I can special order something from another store, or if you want to order it in the other store and go pick it up there, I can browse other stores' products and catalogs as well. Or the last option there, which is all products, which really what this is it goes back and it looks in AX, and it sees all of the products that are available to all of the stores. So again, from like a special, if you're maybe auto parts or something like that, your individual store is only so many square feet, but you have access to this huge catalog of products. You can choose all products. In that case, we make a real-time call back into AX to be able to get the full product catalog. Looking into your own store, we actually can do multiple catalogs even within one store. So in previous versions, each store had their own assortment, and that's all that they were limited to. Now they can actually have their own assortment as well as other stores' assortments or all products. And then even within their own assortment, they can have multiple catalogs. So examples here would be maybe a seasonal catalog or a promotional catalog like back to school or something like that. So here you can actually browse different catalogs that could be available to that same store. Or you can go into all products. So all products, again, you can see it's very visual. We use imagery throughout. So as metadata, you can define how the path to these images are constructed. So it makes it easier to manage that. And then you can browse through the different categories. So the swiping on this remote connection is going to be a bit chunky, but you can imagine a nice smooth swipe going across there. This is built on the same category framework that we had in the past, so where you can create multiple retail categories, supplemental category hierarchies, and navigational hierarchies. So here I'm actually drilling down through categories of products. If I wanted to look in maybe at some monitors here. This is using that small card view, but again, I could change that view to any of the other views. If I wanted to view a product's details, much like the customer details, I can come in. I could have multiple images of the product. I can have product specifications. So these are actually defined again in AX as part of their attribute groups that are on the products. They can get them from categories or they can get them from catalogs. And here you can specify, if it was a camera, how many megapixels, or if it's a computer, how much memory it has, or something like that. And then again, the ability to be able to review related products here. So if I wanted to add this product into the sale, again, it's going to ask me which color because it's a product master, and I can add products in that way as well. If I go back to my browsing, I can actually do some comparison shopping too. So this is something that most consumers are used to online. But then you get into the store and now you don't really have that capability unless maybe you've got a bunch of boxes and you're putting them all side by side. But here I can actually, if I'm in a clienteling scenario, I'm working with the consumer, I can make multiple selections and I can choose to compare them. And now I'll get side-by-side information where I can compare, how many megapixels or what's the processing speed or what's the battery life or different kind of features or specifications there. And this same information is available across all of the channels again. So I define this once in AX, and that's the same information that's available on the website or in the store. However, we do have the flexibility that you can do channel-specific enrichment. So if you had some information that you only wanted to be available in the store, you could do that if you wanted to. So now I choose across these. Let's say I can maybe eliminate this one. I don't want that one at all. I could maybe view the details of this one, or I could decide that that's the one that I want, and I can go ahead and add that into the transaction. So with that, we'll move on into the next group of capabilities in the next scenario, which would be customer order. If you're new to the system, then this requires a little bit of an explanation also. What's the difference? What is a customer order? What do you mean by a customer order? It can be a little bit confusing. So the way I look at it is we have cash and carry transactions, which are basically, everything's a sales order in the end, but this is basically fulfilled right at that moment. They walk up to the counter with it, they purchase it, and they leave with it. So that's a completely fulfilled transaction. A customer order is something that's going to be fulfilled at a later time or maybe from a different place. So maybe you're out of something, so you're going to give me a rain check. You'll back order it. I can take a deposit, and when it comes in, I can come pick it up later. That would be an example of a customer order. Another customer order would be, I don't have it in my store, but if you drive down the street, they have it there. So I could place the order here, and you could go pick it up in the store. Because we're omni-channel and all these cross-channel scenarios are important to us, I can place the order online, I can pick it up in the store, I could call into the call center, I could pick it up in the store, however you want to be able to do that. Those are all examples of customer orders, is kind of the term that we use for those. go back to my demonstration. Okay, so here I'm going to search for a customer. In this case, I know the customer's number. Whoops, except that I typed it in wrong. Go ahead and add this customer into the sale. Maybe there's a couple products that they want to order. Oops. And now, if I just tender this now, it's considered a cash and carry transaction. So basically, they'd be buying these two things right now. But maybe they're not in stock, or maybe they're custom ordered. Maybe they need to still be manufactured. So I'm actually going to convert this now into a customer order. So if I go back out into my button grid now, I have this button here that goes into transaction options. And then I can create a customer order here. So the change here is a bit subtle also. So up in the upper left-hand corner, it's now a customer order instead of a sale. The other thing you might notice is that we now have a delivery pivot. So these are the lines on the transaction. These would be if there's any existing payments, or if I did a partial payment, they would be listed here. And now I can have delivery information because it's a customer order. The other change that you'll notice is the app bar down at the bottom has got context-sensitive capabilities that are only applicable to customer orders. So here I can choose to ship or pick up. I can do partial. So if I wanted to choose just one, I could do ship the selected one, and then I could pick up the other, or vice versa. Or in this case, I can just do pick up all. Our store locator, you'll have to excuse the error message about our test account for Bing Maps, but it still works. So this is actually just going to come up by default to the store's address. Depending on how it's set up, you can actually have it go to the customer's address. I'll try that out. I don't know exactly what it's going to do. Okay, so it's going out to some fictional address somewhere, so it's not going to find anything. So you could find the store that's closest to the customer's address, or the current store location. Whoops. I could search. So if I wanted to see if we had stores in the Seattle area. It's going to move the map there. As you move the map, if there's more or less stores, the demo data is a bit limiting, but that store card that you see over on the right-hand side, there'd be additional stores that would be sorted from nearest to furthest. That would be the selections. Oops. I don't know why I keep clicking that. I'll just go ahead and choose the current store, though. I can choose when the pickup date is going to be. And now I've got my, in this case, pickup information, my delivery information, has been set for both of the lines. And now you can see I've got a deposit that's being calculated. So this is also configurable. In this case, I think maybe it's a 10% deposit. But you can set what that minimum deposit amount would be, and you can always override that deposit if you want to. So here I'm just going to go ahead and collect the deposit. And what we do now is we actually make a real-time call back into AX using CDX, which is our Commerce Data Exchange. It makes a real-time call back into AX, and it creates that sales order in real time. So if I were to go look in AX right now, that sales order would be available. It could be fulfilled through a distribution center, or if it's to be fulfilled from a different store, then that store could instantly recall that order and fulfill it. Moving on to our next scenario is daily operations. I mentioned this one's kind of a catch-all. It's for kind of the other things that happen at a store, other than selling and clienteling. A lot of them have to do with your drawer, your shift. So when you first come in the morning, you're going to open your shift. Typically, you'd enter whatever your starting amount is, whatever your starting bank is. Throughout the day, you may add or remove money into that shift, which we call float entries or tender removals. You can suspend your shift, so you can actually have more employees than you have devices or terminals, and you can move your shift around from device to device. So by suspending and resuming your shift, you can actually take a break, and someone else can use your same register. You don't have to leave that register kind of unavailable until the person comes back. We also, in addition to kind of the standard drawer capabilities, we do have time clock capabilities. So here we actually tie into AX and we create time registrations that can be fed into payroll. And we also have some in-store reporting and BI that's new in this release that I'll show you. So if I go back to my home screen now, and because I'm logged in as the manager, I have some different capabilities to me. In this case, I can suspend my shift. So what this is showing me in the upper right-hand corner, it might be a bit hard to read. In addition to who I am, it tells you which store I'm in, and then what my shift is. Or actually, which store I'm in, what device I'm using. So I'm in the Boston store, I'm using device number 2, and then this is shift number 3 is what that means there. So I can log in and log out as much as I want to, but I currently have this machine kind of reserved because my shift is here. If you have multiple cash drawers, then multiple people can use the same device because each shift is associated to a cash drawer. But if I wanted to be done using this device and giving it to someone else, and I don't want to share shifts, some retailers, kind of the cash management is a bit more flexible and they'll let people just share a shift. We have the flexibility to do that either way. I could actually suspend my shift. That'll log me out. Now someone else could use the device, and then should I want to use it again, and it could be on a different device, when I log back in, I can resume it. And I'm a manager, so it will actually let me resume anybody's shift, but that's a privilege that can be configured for the users. So here we actually do have multiple cash drawers set up. So I'll choose which drawer I want to use that shift in, and now I'm ready to begin selling again. The next thing to show you under daily operations would be our reports. So these are in-store reports that they don't need to use either some different application or some web portal or anything like that. It's all in that same kind of immersive experience within the client. These are sample reports that we ship out of the box, but the reports, like the UI and like a lot of the other aspects of our solution, are all data-driven. So you can create or modify these. You can create new or modify these reports, and then push that down as metadata from AX into the stores. And now they can have different reports without having to write code, without having to deploy any new bits or copy any files. It's all basically a simple XML definition that's defined. You can put that into AX, push that out to the stores, and now they have new reports. And so these are pretty basic ones, but really the point here is more so than providing a whole suite of reports, the capability to be able to do custom reporting. So if I want to look at the top 10 products that have been sold here, you can set your date ranges, and very quickly they get visual reports. So it can be tabular as well as graphical. So these are my top 10 products that I've sold over that date range. And you can also be able to go back and choose maybe what are the busiest times your store are, and you can use this for staffing purposes. If you want to know that it's going to get busier, at 2 o'clock, or maybe it's slower at 5 o'clock or something like that, you can check to see how you're doing on an hourly basis as well. Store inventory would be the other capability that we have in the clients. Again, it's not selling, and it's not kind of your daily operations as far as your how it relates to your drawer or your shift, but it's basic picking, receiving, and counting capabilities. So within the store, inventory comes in all the time, so they need to be able to receive inventory. So it could be transfers from other stores. It could be a purchase order that was placed that's set to drop ship to the store, or it could be just their weekly delivery from the distribution center. They basically need to be receiving inventory quite often within the stores. Picking would be if they're transferring inventory out. So that could be because another store needs something, or you're sending a bunch of seasonal products back to the warehouse, or you need to pick an order. So we can do basic picking and receiving. So these are the same orders and transfer orders that are in AX. We basically surface that UI to be able to perform those picking and receiving activities. We can do two types of stock counting. So I can create a stock counting journal in AX. I can specify which products need to be counted. And then when I open up that stock count in the client, then it tells me, go count these things. So it's very useful for things like cycle counts, or if maybe for loss prevention, you're going to have them go count all of the men's shoes or something like that, just to do a quick spot check on the quantities. Or you can do an ad hoc stock count, which is probably what I'll show, where you can just kind of scan products and enter counts and then send that information back into AX. We also have price check capability. So this is good because it allows you to do a price check in the context of a customer at a location, but without actually having to start a sale. So not everyone is a cashier today. So maybe I don't get a drawer or a shift, but I still can be out on the sales floor helping people. I can go through and I can browse the catalog with them. I can do a price check for them. So basically it allows you to do that without being in the context of a sales transaction. And then inventory lookup allows you to look up quantities across all the other stores or warehouses. So if I'm out of stock in my store, I can look it up to see if it's available in another store. So we'll go into the demonstration for this one. And here I'm going to just stay kind of in my welcome screen and go into stock count. This would be, I guess there was one that was started previously, but if I was in the middle of counting and I got distracted, or maybe you're trying to count when the store is when it's not very busy, you can start one and save it and come back to it later. Or if there's a counting journal that had been created from the back office and that needs to be counted, then that would show up here as well. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and create a new counting journal. I can use my existing hardware. So if I've already got a scanner, then I can just start scanning products here. In this case, again, it's a variant, so it's going to ask me which one. If you do have barcodes on your variants, then it'll go directly in. So here I'm entering the number for the product master. That's not the most efficient way to do it, is to go by the product master and then keep answering the question about size, color, style, configuration. So you can set up barcodes for specific variants, but that's not that way in our demo data. And then I can specify how many I've got, and then so on and so forth. So I can just keep scanning products and entering quantities. And then when I'm done, I can save my change and come back to it later, or I can commit that, and that will send it back to AX with the counting journals filled in with how many that are there. And then that gets posted back in AX as if you were just doing the counting journal there. Next, we have our role-based layouts. And in this case, we basically took what our strong points were in our previous releases with Enterprise POS, which is the fact that the UI is all metadata driven. We knew that was a very important capability, and it kind of sets us out amongst our competition. So we really heavily invested that again in the new clients. We didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater there. So we've improved on that functionality, and we've brought it forward into the new clients. So some things that are possible are, again, using functionality profiles to determine the general configuration settings for the store. We do things in profiles so that you can make that change once, and it'll apply to all of the stores that use that profile. So examples of a setting in functionality profile would be which reason codes or which info codes are prompted at various points in a transaction. So if I'm doing a return, maybe I need you to choose why you're doing that return. So that's all set up, say, in a functionality profile. Multiple stores can share that same profile, and therefore when I make that change, it affects everybody. Visual profile are for things like your branding, your theming, your color schemes. And then screen layouts are more of which functionality you're going to surface and how that's going to be laid out. So the actual positioning of something. And then we can also set up the permission groups. So I mentioned before I have a cashier and a manager. One way that you can surface or you can restrict what someone can or can't do is by which UI you surface to them. So if I don't give you that button in the button grid, then obviously you can't perform that action. But other things are done more so in permissions or settings, which is maybe I do allow you to do a return, but only up to $50. Anything over that, maybe the manager needs to do it. So those are defined within the permission groups. So we'll go in and show the role-based layouts. So for this, I'm actually going to go into AX. And just a quick example of the functionality profile. Under the retail area page, if you go under POS and then profiles, you can see there's actually quite a few different profiles that we use. Functionality profile, visual profile are just a couple examples. But functionality profile is going to, the example I used about info codes is going to allow you to set those here. So depending on what operation is happening, whether it's a return, a void, a tax override, you can set it to prompt for specific information. So an info code can give you a predefined list of choices, or it can be a free-form text field if you need to put in an explanation about something. So info codes themselves are very, very flexible. You can actually chain them together, so you could actually ask a series of questions if you needed to. And then one info code can call another one. So if I answer yes, then do that, and if I answer no, then do this. So they're pretty flexible in what you can do there, and then this is where you would set that up at a store level within the functionality profile. The visual profile is kind of the login screen background. It's kind of the shared settings that you want everyone to use, regardless of their role, and it would be device specific. So one thing that we changed in R3 is that we now know the type of application that it is. It's actually, in this build, it's not pulling it in for the enterprise POS ones. But if I go to my new Windows 8 client, you can see the device application is specified there. So you'll see that there's different capabilities. If I go back to an enterprise POS one, it's going to have a different set of accent colors than the modern client does. So you'll see that in a couple different places, whether it be visual profile or screen layout, we now need to know which application you're using since we have more than one point of sale client now. But within this, I can set my theme. Whoops. Actually, this is incorrect demo data here as well. For the modern clients, you'll have two themes out of the box, which is basically light and dark. So the dark one has a black background with light fonts, and the light one has a light background with dark fonts. It sounds pretty limiting, but we actually have the ability to specify an application background also, which is an image. So you can actually take the background, which would be either just plain black or plain white, and you can have an image there. And we've been playing around with different options, and it really makes it, it goes well beyond just your light and dark theme. At that point, really all you're using it for is kind of what the fonts are going to be like. And we can also do, again, on the background image. So when I was logging in at the login screen, I was actually showing you the Contoso one, which would be an apparel store. And here we had the Contoso login screen for the electronics store. Then we have our screen layouts. So in Enterprise POS, you would go into the designer here. And if you're familiar with this, you can drag and drop the controls, and you can set screen layouts for the point of sale by store, by register, or by user. So this would be the old designer that we have that works with the Enterprise POS. With the new clients, we have a new designer. So here I know that this is a Windows 8 application. So when I click designer, it's going to give me the designer for the new client. And we'll go in and show a bit about how this works. You'll see that back here you have you can specify the content. So for this particular Fabricam manager screen, actually I should probably use Contoso since that's what I'm showing you. The Contoso manager screen, there are 4 button grids on its welcome screen and 2 button grids on the transaction screen. So right now the welcome screen is limited to button grids. So you can have up to 5 button grids on a welcome screen. So where we will go with that in the future is we want to be able to surface some of that BI information directly on the welcome screen, maybe some communications or correspondence. We want to make that more customizable. So if you have kind of custom add-ins, you can bring those directly into the welcome screen. So for this release, you can specify up to 5 button grids there. And the button grids can be tasks or it can be drill downs into certain categories. And then, like I said, there's 2 button grids on my transaction screen. And then I can specify images that are going to be used in my layout also. So this is my welcome screen image. I specify what that image is here. You could add additional images that could go directly on the canvas. So maybe in your layout, you want to have your store logo directly on the layout. You can do that. Or you can use the images on things like tab controls, which I'm about to show you. So just real quick again, this is the manager layout that we were seeing here. This is what it looks like in the designer. And this is what it looks like in the app. So a couple of things you'll notice is that the designer doesn't use the theming. So the layout itself is independent of theming. I could use this same layout for Fabricam and for Contoso and for whatever else. The theming comes from the visual profile. The layout and the content comes from the screen layout. So that's one reason why the designer looks different than the actual client. The other is actually some of the data that is utilized to render it isn't available at this point here. So what the key one here being the button grid. So we're actually not showing you the actual button grid that's going to be shown. We're using more of a template that you can use for sizing purposes, and I'll show you a bit about what that means. But I wanted to call out that there are some differences in what you'll see in the designer than you will in the actual client. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new layout now. One good thing is, and I highly recommend it if you're just playing around, is that you can copy an existing layout, and that way, if you mess it up, you don't mess up the original. But from a real user's perspective, if you're just going to make minor changes, then you can always start with an existing one rather than a blank slate. I'm actually going to just create a blank new one so I can show you what it does. You specify what the client is for. Now, this screen resolution is actually just so the designer knows. The modern clients will always run full screen, and that's where I was talking about earlier how we have some scaling issues right now. So all of our demo data has screen layouts that are for 1366 by 768, which is the most common screen layout for tablet devices, so that's what our demo data has. You could create layouts for different resolutions, but that's not what we have right now. So I'm just going to specify the same 1366 by 768, and that's going to set what the canvas size is for the designer. My toolbox over on the left shows me the different controls that can be added in. So we can start off with maybe the receipt, which is the main transaction screen. And you can see it's pretty easy to kind of drag and drop this around and place it where you want it to be. It'll snap to the grid to make sure that things align properly. And you can resize that. I'm not going to spend too much time making it look good. With each of the different controls, you can right-click them and choose Customize. And now you have different options that can be specified within each control. So in the receipts, you have our 3 pivots of lines, payments, and delivery. So we have 3 sets of fields that can be added for lines, payments, and delivery. So in this case, if I wanted to show the product name, the quantity being purchased, and then maybe the total without tax or something like that, you can see I can add those columns into the grid. And if I wanted to reorder them, then I can move them up and down the list here. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And you can do that for payments and delivery as well. I can add in my totals panel. So in this case, it comes in blank. And just like the others, I can drag and drop them to resize it. And I can also specify what's in there. So you can have actually 2 columns in your totals panel. And you can specify what goes in the left column and what goes in the right column. If you only want 1 column, you can do that too. So I can just add in my subtotal, my tax, and my payments. If I'm a very simple retailer, then that's all the information I want to show. Maybe I don't do customer orders, so I don't care about any of the deposit information or anything like that. Or you can maybe add in things that don't necessarily line up and add up. Like I want my number of lines over in the left column and maybe what my total discounts are in the left column. So you can see how you can specify how that works as well. And then you can add button grids directly to the canvas. So up to 5 button grids. Which button grid it is was defined in that previous screen. And then this is kind of that example of how it's just a sizing template. So this is actually just a pattern that will keep repeating. So depending on how big I want my button grid to be, I can specify this. And now I'll know how many buttons of each size will fit. So again, it's not a direct representation of the button grid as much as it is to know how many of each button size will fit and how much space I need to allow. My demo stopped working. Oh. Still connected. I was going to show you something really cool. Oh, it's coming back. Okay. Oh, now I've built it up. Now your expectations are too high. Okay. I think it's cool. So all of this is actually pretty similar if you're familiar with the Enterprise Pause. It's very similar capabilities. I think it looks a little bit nicer. It's a little bit easier to use. But we actually have some new capabilities also, and that's something called a tab control. So you've already seen me use it here, so you can see how it works. So here I have my number pad and my tasks occupying the same space. So in Enterprise Pause, you couldn't do that. So sure, a number pad is really good to have, especially on a touchscreen device, for when you need to enter amounts or enter in an item number. But if you think about it, in most cases, you're scanning barcodes and swiping credit cards. How often do you really need that number pad on the screen all the time? And in Enterprise Pause, that's using that valuable real estate all the time. So another example of that would be this customer information. So I've got my customer information directly out on the canvas. But again, do I really need to look at your address the whole time that I'm working with you? Probably not. So I could actually use my tab controls as a way to be able to fit additional information and really get information density onto the screen and still have it look good. So in my tab control, I can add multiple tabs. And you can have as many of these as you'd like. Let's say I'll do 3 tabs here. You can specify whether the tabs are on the left or the right. So if you think about it, if the tab control is going to be on the right side, then you probably want the tabs on the right side so that you can hit them with your thumb. If you put the tab control on the left side, then you can put them on the other side. But it's completely up to you how you want to do that. Let's say this one's going to be my tasks. And so therefore, I want my button grid to be in here. You can actually select an image or an icon that would go on these as well. My second one, maybe I want this to be my number pad. And I'll call this numpad. And I can, even in the designer, you can switch back and forth to see how that works. And now maybe my third one is going to be my customer control. So I could put this directly on the canvas, but I don't want to look at that information all the time. So then, this is going to be my customer information. And then this can be customized either on the canvas or in the tab control. And just like the others, you can choose whether you want to or not show different information. So the customer's image, their name, you can see all the different fields that can be allowed here. So this can actually get quite a bit information. And so if this was directly on the canvas, that would take up a lot of space. So that shows kind of, again, another good use situation for the tab control. The button grids themselves are the same button grids, actually, that we use for Enterprise Pause. So in my demo data here, I've got a very long list of button grids. Each individual retailer may or may not have that many, but it shows the flexibility of what you can do. So I could actually take a button grid that we used for Enterprise Pause, and I can use that same button grid in the modern client. So one way to think about it is if it's very simple, you can define the one button grid once and use it everywhere. However, there are some drawbacks to that, and it's mainly around the visual styling of them. So the way that the modern Pause client visually styles something versus the Enterprise Pause, it's different. So you've got some flexibility there on what you want to do, but it's the same button grid designer for both. So that would be a button grid that was designed for the modern Pause client, and now this would be a button grid that was designed for the previous one is Enterprise Pause. This is the modern Pause client. So same button grid, same data, same schema, just gets rendered differently in the client, and they have the same capabilities. So I'm going to have to apologize with my with the issue that I had with my demo machine right before we started. Like I mentioned, I'm remoting into a machine in Redmond. So for that reason, I actually don't have a phone demo for you today. We can talk about it a bit. If you come to the session tomorrow, I'll try all through the night if I need to be able to have that phone demo available. If you were in the session yesterday with Ashvin and Michael, then you'd have seen the phone a bit. But again, I'll do my best to have that available for the session that's tomorrow. Same room, I think, at 9 o'clock tomorrow. We can talk about the phone a little bit, though. So it uses a lot of the same capabilities. It uses the same retail server. So from a functional perspective, from a business rules perspective, from a data access perspective, it doesn't matter which client that you're using. It could be the client on the phone, or it could be the client on the tablet. From a capabilities perspective, I mentioned earlier in the session that we really focused on the Windows 8 client as kind of the first and best. The Windows Phone, it's a subset of the functionality. Some of that was pretty much by design, and that certain tasks lended themselves better to the larger canvas than on the phone. Some of it was really just prioritization and being able to really focus on the Windows client and get that one right. Also, so the Windows client will ship as a fully deployable out-of-the-box app, so you can actually just take it as is and use it. From a customization perspective, you get the source code and you can customize it and extend it. The phone is shipped as part of the SDK. So the phone will have to be compiled and deployed. So that's kind of another difference between the Windows 8 client and the Windows Phone client. But functionally, again, they both use retail server, they both use CRT. In theory, they have the same capabilities, but from a scoping perspective, the phone in this release is a subset of those. And I'll do my best to be able to demonstrate that phone tomorrow. So with that, I'll call Yabin up, and he'll talk a bit about retail server, with the focus being on retail server in the session tomorrow. This is more of a quick overview. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Jeff is more focused on the functional capabilities. I will have my discussion more focused on the technical. So when you look at the retail from dynamics perspective, we actually started our journey since AX 2009 to deliver the capabilities, deliver the omni-channel capabilities. So we have retail Dynamics AX 2012 feature pack. We shipped R2 for R3. Along this way, we delivered the online channel as part of R2. We deliver the R3 with mobility and with retail server. So there are a couple of things that, for my discussion, I want you to remember. One, either online or the retail server or the store, we have a single platform. We're moving into a single platform. That's the platform with a core called the commerce runtime. So that's number one. Number two, we're moving into a single data schema. Instead of have two different data schema, which is in the case in R2, the Dynamics AX R2, for your online store, you have the database schema is different from your physical store. But as part of R3, we move into that direction. We have a single data schema. The number three thing I want you to remember is that Jeff repeated many times is anywhere, anytime, any device. That's where we try to enable. And plus, not only to say the physical devices in the store, but also any touch points. Either the online, your back office from call center, your physical stores using what we call enterprise POS, or using these mobile POS based on retail server. So this is kind of the vision we want to have for retail server. For any retailer, not only retailer, customer. This is your consumer, the people in your store, they could hold up the app, your customer's app, connected to your customer's retail server to perform some business functionalities. They can use the app to submit a wish list. You can use the app and maybe even go to store to do a price check. So this type of thing, along the way, we try to enable. Not only inside the store, but outside the store. Think about the scenarios. You want to have a pop-up store for Christmas in New York Times Square. You don't want to send a large amount of devices into a store and set it up. You want to carry a simple device in your pocket or with a tablet, go into a store somewhere, the rental place, in Times Square, just open your store. So how easily we can do that? So this is the things we try to enable. So there are two slides I'm going to show you. One is a topology in store. Another one is a topology in the centrally hosted cloud. Look at the changes from Dynamics R2. What we call in the past the enterprise PaaS is a client server application. So you have an application which is Win32 based and connecting to a database. Your Win32 app has encapsulated all the business logic plus UI, user interface. And then your database needs to be in the store. That connection is going through ADO.NET. Okay? As part of R3, we shipped it. We moved that into a typical three-tier application. So you have a presentation tier, you have a business services, then you have the database. And the connection between the presentation tier, which is a mobile PaaS Jeff demonstrated, is using the typical protocols, HTTPS. That said, your POS can be anywhere, the mobile PaaS. The services, the middle tier, can be anywhere too. It can be in the local store using the Wi-Fi to connect to it. It can be in a centrally hosted location. That immediately, with this three-tier approach, enabled the additional options for you for deployment. So look at in the store. On the top is your back office headquarters. There are two pieces actually that are very important. Besides the back office, since R2, we shipped something commerce runtime, real-time services. R3, we also changed what's traditionally called the Store Connect. And then you change the name to Commerce Runtime Sync Services. And in R3, we shifted that, changed the architecture, rewrite the completely for that. We changed the CDX, we call the async server. So in the cloud, you have these two services. The important on that, both services today is not using the .NET remoting. It's not using socket. It's a services. So imagine in the R2, when you set up the CDX sync services, you have to open port, you have to open the socket, you have to use IPsec. You cannot have an IP, dynamic IP, because the client is a push model. The server needs to know where's the client. With this re-architecture, as part of R3, not anymore. It's a services. The client using a pull model. The client calling the server to say, do you have any changes I need to download? So in the cloud, that will be the two services. For people new to those CDS real-time, CDS async, real-time is synchronously, you can call from any client to execute certain business logic. For example, you want to get the balance of your gift card, or you want to redeem a gift card. Imagine you have one central office, you have 1,000 stores, and the gift card can be used in any such store. You do need to have a central location to keep the balance. Then you leverage the real-time services to check the balance or redeem the gift card. The sync services is also async server. It's moving large amount of data. So it's a two direction. One is taking the master data you config, for example, the new Jeff demo, the tier layout, from central office, send it down to your store. The moment made it into the store, the next time you open your point-of-sale solution, either the enterprise PaaS or mobile PaaS, you're going to have this new tier layout. Or any product, price, promotions you define central office, you're going to send it down. The second data flow is the data go from your point-of-sale solution for transactions. You want to upload that back into your central office for financial posting. So that is the top part. Between the top and the store, the gray box down there is your physical store. in between the internet. So they connect over, over internet. It could be a local internet if you connect everything through a private network. In your store, so there are a couple components down here. On that database thing, that server, that's a database. In a store, you have a physical database. That's your store database. Both your enterprise POS and your retail server-based mobile POS are sharing the same database, using the same schema. So tomorrow, actually, we're going to go into details to discuss how we actually implement that using the same schema in tomorrow's session. That will give you details on how you do customizations. And if you want to implement additional features, what type of schema in the database, we're going to cover that more detail in tomorrow. But today, instead to have two different databases with two different schema, which is the case in R2, we unified that into a single database. And then the middle one is the retail server. The retail server, again, connects to database using ADO.NET. And then we have the mobile-based, like the modern POS and smartphones, connect to the retail server. Another piece down there is called a hardware station. So hardware station is also called a pay station. That's where the peripheral is going to connect it. And then we have an enterprise POS, which is, like I discussed, the two-tier application connected from using ADO.NET from the POS to the database. So now let's go into details on retail server. What exactly is retail server? Retail server is really IaaS web services. It's a WCF-based web API. The protocol it uses is the modern protocol. It's a REST-based OData API. So when you query retail server, you're using this type of URL. So the domain name, the port number, retail server, /versioning. Then if you want to query customer, you put the customer. And then there are, if you have the customer ID, you can either search the customer. There's a bunch of API you can call. It's a standard OData API. And because it's OData, then the client can be anything. It can be a Windows-based application. It can be iOS. It can be Android. Anybody speak OData can connect it to the retail server. So first of all, retail server is a web application. It's a OData-based API. But more important is, besides authentication, retail server don't have any business logic by its own. What retail server does is, it's a controller. It's a routing controller. Every single business logic is implemented inside that blue box. It's called the commerce runtime. So you talk about customer. You want to search a customer. You want to add an item to cart. You want to search a product. You want to place an order. Every single such API call is implemented within the commerce runtime. So this same exact commerce runtime is also used in the e-commerce online store. Same exact commerce runtime. So this is the one, yesterday, Michael Griffiths talked about the unified platform. We have one unified platform across channel. So imagine you do any customizations. For example, you implement a text connector or plug-in to do tax calculations because you want to use the third-party services for tax calculation. You implement it once. You can use in your physical store, brick-and-mortar stores. You can also use that in your online. You don't have to do twice. But today, for enterprise POS, we haven't moved the commerce runtime completely into the enterprise yet. You still have to use the plug-ins to do the implementation, the plug-in model. So you have to do twice for enterprise POS with mobile POS. But our direction is moving into a single model. So now let's talk about a little bit more about the commerce runtime. Commerce runtime, if you're in your head, think about there are different layers. There's an API layer. For example, you have a customer object, okay, a class. It has a different methods you expose. You can search a customer, you can create a new customer, you can update a customer. You can have a cart. You add item to cart, you can add a tender line to the cart, you can place, convert the cart into a transaction. So that's the top layer. When you get the request coming in from that top layer, going down to below is message-based. If you want to create a customer, there will be a customer request and customer response class defined. And that message got routed into a workflow layer. The workflow layer is you group the different business actions together. So for example, if you want to place an order, there are a couple of things you do. You want to recalculate the price, recalculate the tax, process the payment, and save the transaction. So this type of thing actually is encapsulated in the workflow layer. As part of R3, we're also going to shape an example to say, how do you customize this using the Windows workflow foundation? And take all these different business components, drag and drop in the definition of the WWF using the Microsoft Workflow Foundation. So now you talk about all these different actions, but who implement, for example, I want to process a payment. Who implement that process payment business logic? It's one layer underneath we call plugins. So there are about 30 plus different interfaces we defined. Out of the box, we ship a connector or plugin to implement such functionality. For example, the payment one, there's one connector, and you implement the payment SDK, can do the payment authorization, the payment settlement. For tax calculation, there's an interface for that too. If anybody want to customize, want to replace with your own implementation of such connector, you implement the interfaces, create the DLLs, deploy it to the server, change the config file to say, for that interface, using this implementation, all this is configurable and customizable. It comes down to that. That is really the core for all the business calculation, which is the commerce runtime. So in a single store, you probably need one or two retail servers for your mobile devices, depending on how many mobile devices you have. And typically one or two is really for low balance and disaster, for any failover. If one down, you have another one available. And a little bit more on the hardware station is another is the IaaS application web services that delivers a set API for you to connect to cash drawer, pin pad devices, or printer. That is the hardware station or pay station. We enable that. So tomorrow we're going to talk about more about the extensibilities and how do you customize all these different components. So think about this scenario. You have 1,000 stores. And each store, you have like 10 mobile devices. You have probably 10 enterprise POS and 10 mobile devices. You probably need one retail server, let's say one retail server per store. Then you really kind of have 1,000 machines. That 1,000 machines, the physical hardware is not that expensive. What's very expensive is maintaining that 1,000 machines across all these stores. Let's say in US you have 1,000 stores. Maintaining that means you have the patching the system, making sure the security update, everything's ready, and making sure the latest software that got deployed, making sure the PCI, to making sure the credit card, security for all such machines because it processes a credit card. That's really lots of effort and lots of time and lots of money. You have to maintain that. Because this is a three-tier application, and what we start to enable is centrally hosted. So instead, you have 1,000 machines in 1,000 locations in all different cities and states. You put them in data center. You probably don't need 1,000 machines. You need is a handful, maybe a 50, maybe 100 machines, depends on how many transactions you do every day, and put them into data center. And then in the data center, the top part, that's the data center. You can have a multiple data center. Each retail server as a running instance is a stateless. So any request from any physical store, you still have your mobile devices in the store, right? Your cashiers, they carry a mobile device which is connected to local Wi-Fi and going through your ISP, Comcast, or Verizon, whoever connect to the internet, connect to your data center. And the retail server can take requests, handle requests from all these different stores. You don't have to have a dedicated retail server for store A, store B. The resources are shared. And more important is, even the database is shared. Imagine in the R2, single database has only one store. As part of R3, we enable you to have one database can store multiple stores' data. So instead you have 1,000 databases, you probably have a small number of databases. You put your data in the Sun, the storage area network. You put it over there. You put a SQL head to, the SQL head cluster them to handle the request. Everything start pulling. So that will enable you to be able to handle requests from all different channels in a shared way. And more important is, when we talk about there's a multiple data center, because you have an active data center, you can handle disasters. In the case, you have a mobile devices connected, provisioned to a data center 1 for store 1. I think it's about 2 years ago, New York has the Sunday some disaster. You have a power outage, the data center going to be down. If you know that, you can plan that. You can go back to your AS back office to change your configuration. To say store 1, instead of going into data center 1, the data go into data center 2. Any traffic from the mobile devices can be redirected to data center 2. You do that from central office. Once you've done that configuration, the CDX async server send the data down to the data center. The devices next time connected to such a data center, you will get a redirect. Then your data moved, your transaction moved from one to another one automatically. So this is the kind of centrally host capability there. With that said, I don't think I have enough time to do a demo, but my plan is actually show you the retail server in the IaaS, show you the database, and also show you the package got sent back and forward between a mobile POS with the retail server. That setup actually in the machine got crashed, and I couldn't demo that, but I'll demo that tomorrow. And with that said, we open for questions and answers. Jeff, you want to jump in? So we have about 10 minutes.
Back there?
So you're making reference to the enterprise POS and the modern POS. Enterprise POS is the R2 and prior version?
So the question was that we're making reference to enterprise POS and modern POS, and the enterprise POS is the R2 and prior. Correct. Yeah. So before we only had one point of sale, so we didn't really have to give it a name. It was just point of sale. So we've been referring to that as Enterprise POS. It's the rich client. It's the Win32 client. We continue to invest in that. All of the new capabilities that were added in R3 are in the Enterprise POS client as well as the Modern POS client. In many cases, actually, we do it in Enterprise POS first, and as Modern POS comes along slightly after that. So it's just to clear up any kind of confusion in the naming convention.
So why I asked that is if you were going to implement the first time POS, and I did have, in your example, 1,000 actual hardware POS stations plus 1,000 tablets, would there be truly a reason to have both, or should I just implement the hardware stations as the mobile POS?
Okay, so the question there is, if you're implementing for the first time, maybe I can paraphrase. So is there any reason to have both, I think is what you're saying. Is there any reason to have Modern POS client and Enterprise POS? So they can coexist. I think Yabin mentioned that. They can coexist in the same store. At this point in time, I mentioned that we're shooting for feature parity. So there are a few things that aren't possible in the Modern POS client that are possible in Enterprise POS. Most of them are relatively minor, with one fairly large exception, which would be offline capabilities. So Enterprise POS can host its own local database, and should the store server go down, it can take over as its own server, and you can continue to operate offline. Today, Modern POS client doesn't have that. We're working on it now, but it's not there today. So functional differences or capabilities could be one reason to do that. The other reason would be that the Modern POS clients only work on, say, on Windows 8.1 and 2012 Server R2 and beyond. So if you don't want to go and either maybe upgrade all of your hardware or redeploy all of your OSs, would be another reason to continue to use Enterprise POS. Yeah. There's another question in the back. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I see you over there. Sorry. Yes.
Minimum bandwidth requirements per store for this model will work.
The question is, what is the bandwidth requirements for the mobile POS to work in the store? We're still working on the performance white paper for that. By the time when we release R3, we'll have that ready. And one thing we try to do is really limit down the number of requests between the client and the server, because oftentimes this is going through your carrier, AT&T or some sort of use data. And we want to reduce that. We also do have certain, implementation for caching, for certain data don't change very often. We cache that in the mobile POS. And the actual number, we don't have that yet, but we'll put that together as part of performance white paper.
From a client perspective alone, the requirements are quite low. It's a very thin client. So it'll work on ARM-based devices. So Surface RT is fine. Can go pretty low end on the requirements for the client itself. So what Yabin's talking about is a lot between the client and the server, and we're still going through performance tuning. So we'll know that soon. Another question over here?
Yeah. So on the customer orders that you talked about earlier, how is that different as far as when you save a customer on the standard POS, it saves to the store database. So are we now saving directly back to AX?
So the question is on when we were talking about customer orders, how is it different than it is today, and are we saving it directly back to AX? So actually, so today in R2 or even previous, since we've had customer orders in Enterprise POS, we actually always make a real-time call back into AX. So we've always done that. So we create the sales order in AX in real time. So if you modify it, we create the sales order in real time. If you pick it up, we fulfill it in real time. We also record it locally too, so that way it appears in the journal. So there's reasons for us to record it locally, but we make a real-time call to AX for all of the customer order scenarios.
I'm sorry. The sales order, yes, but the customer information.
Oh, the customer's information about, okay. So actually that hasn't changed either. So for that, we actually make a real-time call as well. So really a lot of the reasons for some of these things is to eliminate the complexity of dual mastering data. So where any of the master data, which we consider all the product information, all the prices, even customers, AX is the master of that data, especially when we're talking about many stores and online channel and call center. It's good to have one master place for that data. So what we do in that case is we make a real-time call. There's lots of people that want to be able to do that stuff offline, and that can be done through customization to be able to create the customer offline and upload it later. Obviously, then you have an issue of managing dual masters. What happens if there's a conflict and whatnot? So
there's no more pushing customer jobs?
No, so actually, so if in the situation of customers, so customers can be created anywhere from any client, although they're created in AX. So it's a real-time call into AX. But if I create a customer in store 1, for that customer information to get down to store 2, then that would be the job that pushes that down. Yep. So creation goes through real-time service. The use of that customer is used through the local data, which would be the async service. Related to that, though, and what's new in R3, I think I mentioned it, but maybe I didn't do it justice, is that we can actually look in other stores' assortments and other stores' catalogs. And so for products, we'll actually go out and make a real-time call, and we'll get that product information. We didn't do that for customers just yet, but there's definitely use cases and scenarios for that. I think I saw a question in the back first.
What's the GA date for MPOS?
The GA for MPOS?
Yeah. Yep.
As part of R3, the MPOS is going to be a beta. So we ship the pre-release code, and which is we have lots of legals working on that as part of R3. For the actual GA, the MPOS is still TBD. We're working with the internal AX release management to define the day. So that will be hopefully available in the next, I don't know if we can announce that or not. We're working on that. And not going to be next year, 100% this year. So, yeah.
Question up front?
Hey, can you use the functionality of the warehouse functions, for example, warehouse locations, the transfers, or whatever you want to do in the warehouse? Can you do that in the mobile field?
So the question was, can you do more of the warehouse capabilities, such as locations and transfers, in the mobile client? Not really. So the picking and receiving and the counting that I mentioned are all very basic flows, and really all we're doing is we're providing a client to update that record that's in AX. So it's pretty lightweight there, and it doesn't, aside from the ad hoc stock count, you never actually create that source document. So if you're picking or receiving, there's been a lot of requests for being able to create purchase orders locally in the store. So far, you can receive the PO, you can't create the PO. For that, you'd have to use the AX client. The other question you mentioned was around location. So in previous releases, we didn't use location at all. In R3, though, we are starting to use the location dimension, and that's mainly for some new capabilities that we have around processing returns. So in R2, if someone brings back something to you and you return it, it basically goes back into your main available inventory, and that may not be the case. If it was the wrong size shirt, then fine, it can go back out on the sales floor. If 3 buttons fell off of it, then it's not available to be sold right now. So now, based on those info codes that I mentioned, you can actually, depending on the subcode you choose, you could choose that it's damaged rather than wrong size, and damaged will go into one inventory location, and the right size will go, or wrong size will go back out into main inventory. So we are starting to utilize some of the location capabilities.
That will come in eventually.
I can't, I don't have a detailed roadmap of what's coming in when, but yeah, as we continue to flesh it out and the scenarios become more rich and we get more requirements from customers and partners, then eventually.
So I think we have 1 minute for one more question. Guys, that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Come see us tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Same room.